It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking property news as we do 7 days a week. And you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, of course, Apple Podcasts, and even Amazon. And another weekend has turned up, a Saturday morning. It is the 3rd of August. Yes, another weekend. Property. It is what we are going to be doing, isn't it, over the next couple of days? If you are looking at some properties today, good luck with that. And Veronica and Martin in Hope Island on the Gold Coast, good morning to you and thank you for your email, letting us know that you are looking at moving shortly to Maroochydore on the Sunshine Coast to be closer to family. You say that you've been in Hope Island for over 10 years, but you want to be closer to your grandchildren. Fair enough. And quite a lot of people moving, of course, into the Sunshine Coast and in particular to Maroochydore from Melbourne. So it is very much an attractive destination. And if you would like to let us know how your property journey is going, don't forget, send us an email. Our email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. Now, in the past week or so, we've talked about Sydney's climbing median house price. We gave this some attention on Tuesday, you might remember, when we spoke to Nicola Powell from Domain. The median house price at the moment is over $1.6 million. The unit price is over, well, I think that's hovering around 780,000, making Sydney the most unaffordable city in Australia. I don't think anybody is too surprised about that. So we want to break all of this down this morning, and who better to catch up with on our Saturday morning than Anthony Landau, the Managing Director and Mortgage Broker at Equilibria Finance. Good morning, Anthony. Welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast. Yes, as I say, Sydney's median prices hitting new records. And I guess the question is, where does Sydney sit as an affordable city to live in? Well, I think we all know the answer to that, don't we?
Yeah, g'day, Craig. Great to be here. And it's almost a rhetorical question, that in the sense that we all know how unaffordable Sydney has become. As you said in your introduction, we hit over $1.6 million median house value. That was back in May. It's eased off a little bit since then, down to about 1.45, with units at about $850,000. So the average of that in terms of buying a property in Sydney, of the houses and units, the median price is $1.170 million, which makes it the most unaffordable capital city in Australia. But interestingly enough, it's the second most unaffordable city in a recent affordability report in the world, behind Hong Kong.
Yeah, so certainly no surprise just how expensive Sydney property is. So, Anthony, looking at the Sydney runaway market prices, let's look at the high-performing growth suburbs across Sydney, because there are so many of these, and sometimes because of the way the prices have escalated, a few suburbs just sort of pop their head above the parapet and surprise a few people. So let's hear from you with regard to these growth suburbs this morning.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of work looking at Sydney as a whole, grew 6.3% over the last 12 months, but the top performing suburbs were around Blacktown, Southwest and Parramatta. So we saw Mount Druitt. Its median value grew to about $860,000. That represented an annual growth rate of 14%. Fairfield, Canterbury, all grew around about 11.5%, 12.5%, 13.5%. So some really, really strong growth around the southwest, the inner southwest and the Blacktown area. The southern parts of the eastern suburbs grew 10.46%. Blacktown and Liverpool both grew around about 10%, as did Campbelltown. So we're really seeing some strong growth in some of these outer suburbs that have grown at over 10% over the last 12 months, which is very, very strong growth indeed. In terms of our regional areas, where are people moving to? Where are we seeing the strong growth? An interesting number, we've talked a lot about some of the commutable areas having grown strongly, and that's true, but we're actually seeing the strongest growth up in and around the Richmond Valley, over 12%, the Upper Hunt Valley, not including Newcastle, over 10%, and some of the areas closer to home, Bathurst and Wollongong, grew in and around 7%. So we've seen some really, really strong growth, even outside of the city, in some of those regional areas that are 4, 5, 6 hours out of the city, where people are basically having a sea change and relocating completely.
All right, we are talking to Anthony Landau this morning, having a look at some of these suburbs in Sydney. We'll come back and we'll find out specifically why some of the growth is taking place. We'll talk about that next.
Unlock the secrets of real estate and stay informed about the latest real estate buzz with hot market trends, emerging suburbs and hidden gems.
And right now it is time for another 30-second property tip, and we are going to the warm climate of Brisbane. And Chris is back with us. What have you got for us this morning, Chris?
Yeah, morning, Craig. Look, our tip is for the sellers out there, if they're looking at an agent to choose and how to market their home. We're finding massive gains with the agents that are producing high quality video, good music, good pictures, good transitions that are really engaging with the audience, and it is attracting more buyers to their home. So if they're looking at selling and they want more competition, more buzz around that home, find an agent that does high quality video.
Each week, we bring you in-depth real estate discussions, including inspiring stories from homeowners, knowledgeable real estate professionals and economists. Whether you're a buyer, seller, or just a real estate enthusiast, we are your ultimate property podcast.
And it is a real estate weekend right across Australia. Talking property on your Saturday morning. Anthony Landau is here. We are talking about the runaway market of Sydney. And just before the break, Anthony was stepping over some of these suburbs. Anthony, some people might want to know, why are we specifically seeing some of that growth that you just talked about before the break? What is driving some of those suburbs?
Yeah, the word you used there was runaway growth, and you're spot on. Sydney is virtually becoming unaffordable to a lot of families, particularly those looking to upgrade from a unit. Look, the main reason we're seeing the trends where we are around, say, Sydney Metro, in a lot of those out of the suburbs, southwest, we're seeing people drifting to, I guess, what would be deemed, if you like, more affordable suburbs. All of the suburbs I mentioned before, Mount Druitt, Fairfield, Canterbury, Marylands, Liverpool, Campbelltown, they all have a median house price in and around the 1 million, 1.1 million, or even a little bit below $1 million, which was well below our median house price. In fact, some of the areas that would be deemed less affordable, maybe the North Shore, the eastern suburbs, the northern beaches, we're actually seeing a decrease in growth. The suburbs are literally becoming unaffordable for people to buy into. I guess they're deemed more affordable for those people looking to try and either upgrade or get in the market, with the median value for these suburbs I talked about being in and around, or even some of them still under $1 million. So if we move to the regional areas, it's harder to detect a specific trend, because we've got areas that are located well out of Sydney. We've also got some areas like Wollongong, Bathurst that are more commutable, but the strongest growth really has been areas that are well and truly out of Sydney, where the median price is under $500,000 in the Richmond Valley and Upper Hunt. So people are actually moving from the cities into some of these really regional areas up around Richmond, Tweed. We've got the Tweed Valley, Kiama, Dapto, Wollongong. So people are moving to more affordable areas is what we're seeing, and that comes through in the data. In terms of the regionals, it's not just those areas that are commutable to Sydney. We're actually seeing people now relocate and reset up and establish themselves in regional areas of New South Wales that are more affordable to bring up their families.
Yeah, and the one thing that we know about higher prices is that it often impacts the way that people look at leveraging themselves into mortgages. And what some of the mindset is from people when they weigh up whether or not to buy in Sydney or to move somewhere else. Of course, there is this segment of cash buyers that this doesn't apply to. But more importantly, what are you seeing regarding these higher prices and how it's impacting the mortgage holders' behaviour and their credit flows, particularly around all of that mindset that I mentioned?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we're essentially seeing this growth despite an array of downside risks or factors. There's the cost of living, interest rates have increased, affordability challenges, serviceability has gone down 30 to 40% over the last couple of years since interest rates have risen. So people just can't afford to live where they want to anymore in a lot of cases. So what we're seeing from owner-occupiers a shift in where they want to live. They're moving to some of these outer suburbs. They're moving to some of these regional areas because for two reasons. They just can't actually borrow as much, and it's harder to save for a deposit in this challenging environment. The other trend we're seeing is some first home buyers actually purchasing an investment property. The rent vesting trend is increasing, where we're seeing some people go, look, I want to live here, I'm going to rent, and I'm going to buy in an area that maybe I can live in down the track, or at least get a foot in the market and buy it as an investment property in an area that's more affordable. Some of those investors are even buying outside of Sydney and New South Wales now into other states that are more affordable. And we've touched on in the past, Craig, it's been a bit of a split market. We've focused on Sydney today and New South Wales, but we've seen growth in Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane anywhere from 23 to 16% over the last 12 months because they are deemed more affordable. And nationally, we're seeing that drift to more affordable areas, and mortgage holders are reflecting in terms of their behaviour, looking at those more affordable properties with their couple of challenges around how much can they borrow and the challenges of finding money to save for a deposit, and then all of the cost of living pressures that are coming through at the moment as well.
All right then, Anthony, plenty of insightful information there around some of these runaway suburbs and the cost and just how expensive it is to get into the Sydney property market. Enjoy your Saturday, enjoy your weekend, and thanks for coming back on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Not a problem at all. Great to be here, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Stay ahead of the competition with the latest news, insights and data analysis on the Property Podcast that keeps you informed.
It's because they didn't do the basic due diligence and groundwork, and they didn't inspect their own financial circumstances well enough in the first place to establish whether they could continue to hold that portfolio through the tough times as well as through the good times.
This is something that you have done. You've said, yes, okay, the bank is giving me the money. I need to just drill down here and go further into my own set of accounts to make sure that if A, B and C happen, I've got enough money to cover myself.
Exactly. What they don't do is they don't take into account inflation and what would happen if we also have a cost of living crisis at the same time that you're buying and investing in property. It's all very well for you to say, well, can I invest and stand a 3% interest rate hike? Because if interest rates are going up, it is going up to curb inflation.
We don't just report on real estate news, we take you to the source of the information. We produce more property podcasts every week than anyone else. We are your trusted guide for all things real estate. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.